All right, we are on update 37, which has absolutely nothing to do with Styanax, but he's my favorite Warframe, and I feel like talking about him, so that's what I'm going to do. Seeing as how he's my favorite Warframe, I have invested into him as much as I possibly can, which includes a whopping 5 Tau Forged Crimson Shards over here, all for ability strength, because Styanax is a Warframe that really loves ability strength to make him as ridiculous as possible. I think it's quite fun to just pile on these insane numbers on him. The biggest thing that we want to worry about with Power Strength is Final Stand. This is his damage dealing ability. You have spears that are thrown by you and your clones that pop up as well. The spears themselves deal damage on impact and they explode as well when they hit an enemy or a surface. So you're getting blast and slash damage. More importantly, the explosions will guarantee apply slash status. You don't actually get any blast status effects from this, which would be pretty crazy if that happened. But you do get slash status, which is great for melting through enemies pretty easily. Once you hit them with enough spears, if they don't die from the damage right away, they're just going to bleed out. And of course, the wonderful Intrepid Stand augment, allowing you to generate Overguard on hit. Not Overguard on kill, like some abilities do. It is just on hit. So when you hit either with the javelin projectile or the explosion, you are generating Overguard. It's a base 60 Overguard, and then you are able to apply additional Overguard at half the rate to any allies within affinity range. So other Warframes, their companions, and it also includes like defense and rescue targets. Even if it doesn't show up on their UI items, it will apply Overguard to them if you look at like the health bar that hovers over the top of them. So this is super useful for just keeping everything alive, not just yourself, but it works best for Styanax since he gets the most Overguard. A little bit selfish, but if you were able to generate 266 Overguard per hit for everyone around you, that would probably be kind of cracked. So, understandable. And the Overguard cap also goes up with power strength, so that's another reason to pile on the strength. Now, this is great and all, but an ability like this, you kind of want to be able to use it on command and use it a lot so you can generate tons of Overguard and kill everything that comes at you. Well, that's where we have the combination of Rally Point and Nourish to make sure that you and your entire team can do whatever you want with your abilities. So you have a passive energy generation rate on Rally Point. With the power strength that I have, it's 10.6 energy per second, which is already pretty great. It also has a couple of other effects, but they're not super important. And then, of course, Nourish has that crazy energy multiplier that also scales with power strength. So the super quick math there of 10.6 energy multiplied by 3.12, you're generating over 30 energy per second for you and your entire team, because you can affect your allies with Nourish if for some reason your teammates aren't using Nourish themselves, which is pretty rare to see today. And you're also able to affect your allies with Rally Point. And it's really nice that both of these abilities can be reactivated while their durations are still counting down. So if you missed somebody, you can get near them, just activate your abilities again to give them ridiculous energy generation and a nice bonus viral damage to all of their weapons and abilities. So Styanax, between those and his Final Stand augment, is able to be a really good team player. He can keep defense targets alive. You can hard carry people by giving them Overguard and massive damage increases. And of course, allowing everybody to use their abilities as much as they want. Because if you are somehow managing to spend more than 30 energy per second on your abilities, I don't know what you're doing aside from just trying to waste energy. We also have the great Pharaoh Strike ability on his second. Every once in a while, you're going to come across hard targets that you don't want to just sit back and bombard constantly with Final Stand because they have status resistance or they just have a ton of armor. So you can just slap them with Pharaoh Strike really quickly and their armor is gone. It is technically defense reduction, so it also applies to shields, but let's be real. You're only using abilities like these to remove armor. Shields aren't that big of a deal still. Speaking of shields, Rally Point also has a shield regeneration effect that's on kill or kill assist that we're not really super worried about because we're generating Overguard. There's a few Warframes that like to have additional shields for other things, and Styanax actually is one of them because of his passive ability. You get increased crit chance based on your shield capacity, which is a nice thing to have. It's not super necessary, but it is something that you can mod for if you feel like it. So looking at the overall build here, we really are just piling on as much power strength as possible and not focusing on really anything else, because the massive amount of overguard that we can generate on command takes care of our entire survivability. If we were to use redirect or primed redirect on this build, it's not for survivability. It would just to be to get the additional crit chance off of his passive, which is absolutely a viable option. It's just I'm not going for that right now. I didn't really feel like it was necessary to do. Most weapons that you are using to take care of hard targets already do enough damage on their own. The increased crit chance isn't necessary, but say you don't have like a maxed out Kuva Heck right now, or a Vectis Prime that you want to use to one-shot tough targets, it's totally understandable that you might want to throw on redirect to buff your weapons more with some additional crit chance. So we've got all the usual suspects here for Power Strength, Blind Rage, and Transient Fortitude. Growing Power for more Power Strength, Augur Secrets for a little bit more splashed on. If you're going to use redirect on your build, this is the one that I would suggest swapping out because it's the lowest amount of Power Strength. Precision Intensified, because the ability that we really want to buff up as much as possible is Final Stand, both for the damage output and the overguard generation. Molt Augmented, of course, for even more Power Strength. The last arcane that you use on here can really be whatever you want. Duration is nice, both because it affects the duration of Nourish and Rally Points, but it also increases how long you are up in the air throwing spears with Final Stand. So it is affected a little bit by duration. You don't want to go super high duration for that exact reason, because you're going to be up in the air for even longer with Final Stand, which isn't always what you want. It's nice to kind of find a comfy middle ground for how much duration you want, so you're not using Final Stand for like 3 seconds straight. But if you feel like you don't want the additional duration, you can use whatever augment you feel like on here. Excuse me, whatever. You know, my brain just completely shut down. We're going to move on. So, Precision Intensify stacked up with this, stacked up with Molt Augmented and Growing Power, ends up giving Final Stand, I believe it was 528% Power Strength. So, I think you can see where the focus of this build is going to be. Now I'm going to stop yapping now, and we're going to go murder some things with this, because that's the whole point of Styanax. You run into a mission, you kill everything that gets in your way, you buff up your entire team with more energy generation and overguard so they can't die and they can do whatever they want, and everybody's having a good time. Styanax works great as a solo frame because everything that he does, he applies to himself, and he works great in a team setting because you just make everybody happy. I don't see how you could be unhappy with energy regeneration like this. You're in a team with a Styanax, he gives you these, and now you're just regenerating more energy than you could ever possibly use. And once the enemies show up, just tap your 4, aim your spears at them, and they're all going to die. If they don't die right away because of slash damage or they're armored, then just wait a few seconds, they're going to die afterwards. Everybody's bleeding out. And more importantly, we're generating so much overguard on hit, we're already up to 20,000. With basically no time or effort. You do have to play the game a little bit because Final Stand is an ability you have to aim yourself. The spears, the javelins fire in kind of a horizontal line relative to where you're aiming, so you're not going to be able to pile on every single one of them in the exact same spot, but you can get them pretty close. The nice bit of range that we have on this build allows for the blast radius of those spheres to hit multiple enemies very easily, and one blast hitting multiple enemies counts as multiple instances of damage, which means overguard is generated multiple times on a single explosion. Hence how we're able to get up to nearly 70,000 overguard in just 1 minute of gameplay. The funny thing about having this much power strength on a build like this is the javelins do so much damage that if you're using a build like this outside of Steel Path, enemies die so quickly, they usually just die from the explosion or the initial javelin impact if they get hit by it, that you actually don't generate very much overguard. Although at the same time, that's not a huge deal because if you're managing to just kill everything that you even look at with your Final Stand ability, you don't really need to worry about survivability too much because everything is dead. The only thing you have to pay attention to is, if you're not using Final Stand constantly, you're going to want to pay attention to your overguard. That way you can reactivate this before your overguard runs out, just to keep it topped up. And then, of course, you pay attention to the duration on Nourish and Rally Point. And the only thing that is a touch annoying about this build is just the fact that the durations of Nourish and Rally Point are not the same, but that's really not that big of a deal. I mean, asking Warframe players to pay a little bit of attention to timers on their screen, I don't think is asking for too much. Once you have all of your Overguard built up, you can do pretty much whatever you want. It really depends on the situation. If you're doing a defense mission, you're probably wanting to kill enemies as much as possible because you're going to be reducing the threat to your defense target as well as giving it Overguard. If you're doing something like this, once you have your Overguard built up, you can kind of just do whatever you want. Bring some fun guns that you might not normally be using and just have some fun with it. Of course, since you got Overguard, you can bring whatever you want and just blast away. You don't have to worry about self-damage. You don't have to worry about really anything. This is about as easy and laid back as it can get. You don't have to worry about energy because you're just generating it constantly. You don't have to worry about survivability. All you really have to worry about is whatever your mission objective is. In this case, it's just kill stuff, and I think I can handle killing stuff pretty effectively, so. The Eximus enemies are one of the cases where you could definitely argue it would be a good idea to utilize Theros Strike, just because they do get increased health and whatnot along with their Overguard. It's really not necessary, though. But I will do one anyways once another one shows up. I also completely skipped over the fact that Theros Strike does regenerate health on hit. It's completely unnecessary for this. It's only really useful if you subsume that ability onto another Warframe, but in this case, with all of those Overguard, there is no reason to worry about health. If you get down to the point where you need your health on Styanax, you're dead. There is nothing we have in this build that is going to save you if you get down to your health bar. So, the nice thing about all that shield capacity is that it does give you a little bit of a shield gate buffer if for some reason you're in a situation where you are getting constantly hit and you manage to lose your Overguard. It gives you a second to jump up into Final Stand and start generating Overguard to keep yourself alive. That's not the only time where things might get a little bit hairy playing Styanax in this way. Otherwise, as long as you're using your abilities constantly, there's really nothing that you should have to worry about. And we'll armor strip the Guardian. And, wow, look at that, he's dead. We'll armor strip this Eximus, and... oh no, he's dead. This is why I never bother replacing his second ability, because armor stripping on command is such a useful thing to have. Like, I should be doing it on Torment right here, but I'm not, because I don't need to. I do so much damage with all of my power strength built up with Molt Augmented and with growing power that even though Acolytes have status resistance, it maxes out at 4 stacks, the amount of damage I'm putting out from the direct impacts and the slash status effects afterwards is so high that that armor really did nothing for him. Styanax is just super fun because he can do basically whatever he wants. And he's a super useful Warframe to have in most situations. I don't think anybody's really going to complain about having Overguard if you're just joining a random lobby, hit some enemies, give everybody a little bit of Overguard for some extra survivability, give them all the energy they could ever ask for. I mean, and you have shield stripping and armor stripping as well. Like, is this just the better version of Trinity? I think he is. I know some people aren't going to be happy about that, but I don't care. All of this power strength investment on Styanax is not necessary, and in fact, I don't know, I might try messing around with a primed redirect build on him at some point as well. It's just really fun to be able to say that your Warframe can get up to above 500% power strength. And actually, I think that technically still would be true without Augur Secrets. So yeah, maybe I will try a primed redirect build on here with an extra Forma, but it's nice that he does so much damage with Final Stand in the first place that you don't have to have this much power strength. All of the Tau Forged Crimson Shards I wouldn't say are necessary, but they are very nice. The more, like I said, the more overguard you get, it's based on power strength. So it's not just how much you generate, it's how much you can hold at once. And that overguard cap applies to your allies as well. So if they manage to get up to that amount, the more power strength and the more overguard you can have, the happier everybody's going to be. And more power strength means more energy. It's just power strength makes everything better on this build. So the more you can pile on, the better. If you can't do all Tau Forge shards, that's okay. You're missing out on 25% power strength, but at this point, you have so much that leaking a little bit here and there isn't a big deal. You can make it work. Just pile on as much as you can, throw javelins at everybody, and have a blast.